welcome again. We are now going into the more practical session. And for that, we had, as you know, two real practitioners that can help a lot in this topic of intergenerational solidarity. The first speaker is Donna Butts. She's the Executive Director of Generations United, a non-profit civil society organization in the United States that's a lot for what they call, or what is called, grand families, families that are taken care by grandparents mostly. And secondly, Kinga Joo, who's a member of the European Economic and Social Committee. I don't know if we have Donna here yet, so maybe we should better start with Kinga. Kinga is working a lot on these issues and has been involved recently in the production of a document of the Economic and Social Committee of the European Union on demographic issues.
Thank you, Ignacio. Thank you very much for having me here. I just want to check if you can hear me well, because I didn't have the chance.
We can hear you perfectly well.
First of all, it's a pleasure for me to accept your invitation on behalf of IFSB. Ignacio and Alex, thank you very much. And it was very useful for me to listen to the presentations before me on behalf of Renata, Anis, and Bahira. And I will try to do my best as almost the last speaker before the last one at this online advocacy workshop to show you some good practices for the topic of today. I also have to mention that listening to the comments and to the questions asked by our young participants here yesterday and the day before, and also today, I became actually very optimistic because these were very smart and straight to the point questions, and I trust you that you know and understand what young people and families need around the world. I also wanted to point to that. In my presentation, I will be focusing on Europe. I am very glad that Bahira had a comprehensive overview of global challenges in terms of demography, and I will now come a little bit closer to the old continent, as we call Europe among ourselves, because this is the as Ignacio introduced me, this is where I am active in the so-called Economic and Social Committee. That is an organization that has an advisory role in the European Union, and it's representing organized civil society, among them family organizations and also youth organizations. I also just like to add that I am a vice president of the Hungarian Family Organization for Large Families. And if you ever wondered how we define large families, here in my country and in most European countries, large families are where parents are raising 3 or more children. So now coming to my slides, I will first highlight some key points in the demographic landscape and some policy actions of present-day Europe. And then I will focus on intergenerational solidarity and give you some good examples on that, I hope, for you. So can I control my slides from here? Can I have the next one? Yes, thank you. And then I will try to do it for myself. Yes, okay, it's working perfectly. Sorry for this. I just wanted to make sure. So you can see that the population of the European Union, so not Europe, but the European Union, that is composed of 27 European countries at the moment, is around 450 million. And as an entity, it has the second largest population after China and India, but its share of the world population, as you can see, is decreasing. So why is this? Some of the factors. The society of Europe is aging fast. On one hand, of course, this is a very good news, as it means that life expectancy is growing, and it is said by 2070, if the present trends continue, it will be 86 years for men and 90 years for women, which is, of course, a very nice number. On the other hand, of course, it is also bad news as the rate of active working age people is decreasing, and the so-called dependency ratio is also on the rise. If you look at the numbers, you might not find the difference between working age population big, but if you look at the dependency ratio of people aged 8 years that I pointed out, you can see that it's the double as of today, that from today until 2070, which is already, of course, a very, very big rise in numbers. So although we are speaking about the European Union as an entity, you have to know that there are huge imbalances among the member states and among regions when it comes to trends in demography. And one of these aspects is connected to migration. Migration inside and outside the European Union. The so-called intra-EU mobility, this is the official term for migration inside the European Union, is very closely linked to the phenomenon of brain drain. And we sometimes now say also a generation drain, whereby mostly the young and qualified are moving to more prosperous countries and are forming families there. Of course, they can do this clearly because thanks to the free movement inside the European Union, one of the 4 freedoms, but still it has a very huge regional impact. Then migrants coming from the so-called third countries, so from outside of the European Union, are also unequally targeting European countries, adding to this regional imbalance. How fast society is changing due to these demographic trends is very visible from the composition of households. Already today, a third of households has only a single occupant. That is, 1/3 of the European population is living alone, and this number is constantly growing. Linking to the topic of today, intergenerational solidarity, I think loneliness among young as well as among old is something to seriously consider. On my next slide, and I will try to do it by myself. Yes. Sorry, because I need to come back, and it's working a little bit slower. And I don't see the other map. Maybe it's there was another map according to member states. I don't know if we can put it there. Anyhow, so normally on the next slide you should see two maps of Europe. One is with the member states, and one is with the regional map of different regions in Europe. And it is a projected population change for 2050. And on country level, it might be interesting to point out that around 1/3 of the countries foresee a significant population growth, while others, some or huge losses in population. So the EU cannot be considered in this sense as as an entity of countries with growing or falling population. And looking at the regional distribution of this population change, there is a very big imbalance also between regions. And I wanted to show you Spain, and I don't know if I will have the chance to do that, because, for example, in Spain, there is a foreseen population growth of 13%, but it is very limited regionally, mainly to the southern eastern part. For the new challenges now becoming universal for all countries in the EU is the falling birth rate, and that is now in all of the EU member states below replacement level. And it means that the traditionally considered child-rich countries like France, Ireland, or Sweden are also below replacement level. And in some countries, this is even closer to one child than two children, which is, I think, an alarming trend. Also, there is the poverty factor for having children or of having children. It is still present in some countries, but it is what is new in this phenomenon is that the risk is not diminishing, but it is growing in the last years. And this is also universal all across the EU. And I had a very nice data with this showing that raising children, it increases the rate of poverty, especially for large families, where the risk of poverty, here it is, the risk of poverty is 30%. I think this is also a very a data that we should keep in mind. When speaking about care gap, and I'm here referring by care gap to the difference between the uptake of care responsibilities around the family between men and women. It has narrowed for a while in case of families with small children, where fathers spent more time with them than the earlier generations. But in case of care for the elderly or other types of unpaid work, the situation is not changing. And what is alarming, according to recent data, is that this gap due to the pandemic is growing significantly. And this is why I am waiting very much for the results coming out of the survey on the impacts of COVID, as it was introduced by Anis, to see how big the problem is in Europe. So as for the challenges, the persistent ones and the new ones, these were so pressing that the new commission, the commission is the legislation proposing and enforcing body of the European Union, has now a new portfolio and also a new commissioner responsible for demography. More precisely, she's responsible for demography and democracy, which I think is a nice reference to the common origin of these two words. In ancient Greek, demos, referring to people. The Commission issued a report based on a big study mapping the key points for action this year. It was done this year. You can find both the study and the action plan in my list of references if you're interested in that. And it is planning to work on 2 other action plans related to aging and the specific problems of rural areas. As an example, as a European example, for what can be done on European level to help families across Europe. I can point to the Work-Life Balance Directive that is already an accepted legal provision. It will enter into force in 2022. And I think this is a very big achievement on behalf of the European Union. It will set minimum standards in paid father's leave, also in parental leave, and the specificity of this parental leave is that there is a part being non-transferable between mother and father, so to encourage the uptake of parental leave by fathers. Also, there are some provisions on flexible working conditions and on carers leave that would facilitate the care for elderly and with family members with long-term illnesses. My last point here on this slide is about the Child Guarantee Program. This is still a plan and it is very much debated. It would allow for support mechanisms helping children and their families in line with the SDG 1 to combat poverty and the risk of poverty. And we hope that it would make the EU the first region in the world to fulfill this goal. As I said, this is in a planning phase. It still needs to go through with all the member states, the acceptance of all the member states, but EU institutions like the Commission and the European Parliament are strongly fighting for this child guarantee to come into force. Now, my last slide with the good practices. Yes, it's after this one. Thank you very much. I listed, this is not, of course, an exclusive list of good practices. It's just that some very practical arrangements on national level and coming from civil society. First, I put Hungary, my own country's Family Protection Action Plan, that it has grandparents subsidized parents' leave since last year. We have heard before about the role of grandparents in taking care of their children. And also in my third point, you see that in Southern Europe, informal childcare is done on a daily basis for more than 20% of children by grandparents. I think such a leave system, such a paid leave system can help these families, and it is a very good arrangement. Then I pointed out that in Poland there is the Mama Plus and 500 Plus program. For those of you who haven't heard about this, the Mama Plus is for women who have raised 4 or more children, and therefore we're not able to be very active on the labor market. The state is providing a state-funded pension for these women, and I think this is also something that that can help large families, extended families also. From France, there is the family care leave, which is on one hand a financial support for those deciding to withdraw from the labor market for a certain period of time to take care themselves of family members who are old or who have a sickness. And also there is a legal recognition tied to that and the basis for pension. And from Belgium, I heard about a very nice initiative that is now spreading around Europe, and it is a cohabitation scheme of young and old, whereby older people who are living in bigger houses or apartments take in young students or young professionals who are starting their career and find it hard to find a housing solution for themselves, and and they share this living space, and it is a very nice example for not being alone. And at the beginning, I pointed out how many lonely households are there in Europe. I am just looking at Ignacio if I still have some more time, or do you prefer if I stop here and wait for the questions?
I think we can have questions now, because that will be interesting. For some reason, we can't contact Donna. She has kind of disappeared. So I'm afraid that unfortunately we won't be able to have her here today. But I think this is also a positive aspect. We can have more questions, more interventions. And also I will invite Bahira, if she agrees, to join the conversation so that more questions that were left for her can be made now. But before all this, we would like at least to show a small video of Generations United so that you can all get familiarized a bit with this thing that has a lot to do with grandparents in America. Hello, Bahira, we have you there.
Ignacio, Donna is there. I see her now on the screen.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. Donna, are you here finally?
Yes, I am, and I apologize. I must have done the time conversion incorrectly.
Thank you very much. Welcome. And you know, Donna, I had presented you before. I think we are all very happy to have you here finally. Thank you. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ignacio. I very much appreciate that. And I'm, again, very, very sorry for being unable to do a time calculation correctly. So I will try to be brief in my remarks. But I wanted to say thank you very much for this opportunity to be with you today. I wanted to share a little bit about Generations United. We were founded really to combat efforts to pit generations against each other. This was a journal cover where you see old and young, and they are basically told to march 10 paces, turn and shoot. Whereas our founders said, no, we formed Generations United to argue for a caring society, and our countries and our world can support our bookend generations, our oldest and our youngest. And in fact, as our society ages, we require more and more intergenerational integration in order to maintain social cohesion, understanding and cooperation, and respect of all human rights of people of all ages and abilities, and to decrease social isolation and loneliness. Yet we've continued to artificially segregate generations. So what's important is that we use an intergenerational lens on our policies, our programs, and our services so that everyone benefits, from individuals to neighborhoods to families and to our world. And it really requires us to really think of all ages and abilities as assets, and to change our conversations from burden to benefit, because mixing it up is the new cool. We know that older and younger people have so much to offer each other and the world. So one way we do this is through intergenerational programs and public policies that are congruent and support each other. So briefly, there are 4 types of intergenerational programs where young serve older adults, perhaps teaching technology. Older adults teach young, could be tutoring or reading, where elders and young serve together, whether it's a community choir, a chorus, or a service project in their community. And then there are intergenerational shared sites where people are actually receiving services under the same roof. Quality intergenerational programs are reciprocal. Each participant receives as well as gives. They're respectful of each other. They're usually done with a purpose, whether that's to look at an environmental issue, to look at how to make a community better, but there's a purpose. And they're intentional in bringing together younger and older people. and especially with intergenerational spaces and places, which really do fit with the UN Sustainable Goal number 11, which calls for inclusive cities, resilient and sustainable communities, safe, with outdoor space that's green for the public to enjoy and to exercise in and to be a part of. And in particular, it serves younger and older people. And this is an example of an intergenerational garden where older and younger people are learning about gardening, growing food together. But there's also intentionally built spaces where, rather than building a facility for seniors or older adults and a facility for younger people, communities can build facilities together so that the dollars go further and young and old have an opportunity to integrate. Great example is in Kotian in Japan, which provides childcare and adult daycare, and the generations mix on a regular basis. Now efforts have gone to entire communities, which really do involve thinking about a community from a whole, not just an individual perspective and not just a particular age group. One way that this is really effective is to do an intergenerational or to host intergenerational dialogues where younger and older people are working together to address serious issues, whether it might be an issue around social justice, as we've seen so much coming out in the United States recently around racial unrest and the need to address that in communities and as a country, that younger and older people together have stronger, better ideas. It could be around employment, lifelong learning. Those are just a few, but it involves creating that kind of a community vision that really helps to provide a deeper understanding and a richer quality of life. When we pull together, we really can do things that really benefit everyone. One way that we look at our work at Generations United is to think about intergenerational policymaking and the principles that are underlying some of the better policies. And those include making sure that when we're thinking about policy, it takes into consideration the lifetime well-being of all. It takes into consideration the fact that an action often has an impact on another generation, whether today or in the future. So it's thinking about that impact of every action on each generation. It's thinking about policy that unites rather than divides generations, and that really gives us our greatest societal and financial impact. And it recognizes and supports every generation's ability to contribute to the well-being of their families and their communities. There's a broad range of issues that have intergenerational potential when you use an intergenerational lens. And in particular, I wanted to point out family policy. Oftentimes, family policy only includes children and parents, not often thinking about aging adults, in particular grandparents, aunts and uncles that are stepping up to play much more of a role in providing family support, whether full-time for children or part-time for children. So to make sure that our family policy is inclusive in terms of language as well as intent. So there are a number of policies that can be looked at with that intergenerational intersection to make them stronger. For example, here in the United States, so many years ago, we developed policy to combat child abuse, but it was only recently that we developed policy to combat elder abuse. Had we thought about abuse from a lifespan perspective, we wouldn't have had to do that piecemeal approach. So really think about the policies that you're aware of, that you know of, that would benefit from that intergenerational lens. And I just wanted to encourage you to take advantage of resources that are out there. I know I shared a couple of links for some of our publications to try to add additional information to this presentation. I hope you'll look at those. I hope you consider participating in some of our, taking advantage of our newsletters, our social media, our virtual global conference that's coming up, but become a part of the effort where people really are trying to think about not necessarily what is, but what can be when we use that intergenerational lens and intergenerational perspective. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Donna. Also, for this effort to make this short. Well, and now we have here some questions and really a very good panel, because we just added also Anis and Bahira, if they agree. I don't know, Remy, if you will be able to make your question by yourself now.
Absolutely, here I am. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, well, first, thank you, everyone, for the very good energy and resources that you're sharing. It's super interesting, and it's also enthusing that so much is being researched and communicated that way. So thank you, everyone. I had a question that's maybe it's a bit off topic, but I was wondering, of course, Europe has a lower fertility rate. However, we might have an increase in large recomposed families, you know, following divorces and new remarriages. I don't know if that's an English word. So I was wondering if some of you had, or of course, North America is also an interesting field of study in that respect. So would you have comments or ideas on this topic of large families, the challenges of large families following recomposition, if I might say, if that's the word?
Thank you, Remy. Bahira?
Hi, thank you for the question. This is a complicated issue because there is some research on these I'm not sure the right word, recomposed families, families created through remarriage. And the research shows that you cannot generalize. In some cases, there are stronger family relationships. The children have more adults, for example, to choose from in terms of mentorship and, you know, caring and all that. But in other cases, there's a complete break with, you know, for example, a lot of times here in the United States, a break with fathers. So, like I said, this is a complicated topic. So, because there are many reasons for this break between sometimes the biological parents and the children. But yes, there are new family forms and new relationships that are created through these new partnerships. But the ties are more fragile. That's, if I'm going to make a generalization, then it's that generalization.
Thank you. Anis, do you have anything to add? I don't know if Anis is listening to us. Yes, I think he is. Or Kinga?
Hello, thank you very much for this question. Of course, this is a phenomenon that is absolutely not unknown, especially in Hungary, where we have quite a high divorce rate among married couples, also with children. On the other hand, I don't have data, and actually it came to my mind that it would be nice to investigate on European level and the effects of this family patchwork families, family recomposition. For a moment when I read your question, I thought you were referring to extended families, when young families tend to return to the place where grandparents are more available, because this is also actually a trend. It depends, of course, from which country we are speaking. But thank you very much, and I think this is really a point of for consideration. Thank you.
And from the American perspective, Donna, do you have any input?
If I understood correctly, here in the United States, we are seeing a significant increase in the number of multi-generational households, so extended family members coming back together, and especially in the time of as we're dealing with the pandemic, a recent study showed that over 50% of the adults that are moving in the U.S. are moving in with family members, and so that ability to depend on each other and rely on each other. And we also know that the role of older adults, especially as children are being schooled at home during this time, is increasing greatly and is one of the strengths that families have.
Thank you, Donna. Maybe we can move now to Africa for another question. Charles Aitbona was asking something originally to I think it was to Bahira, but anyway, maybe you can make your question, Charles.
Okay, I was just making a comment actually that the intergenerational relationship is being noticed even in the workplace, because you have the boss of one generation, they subordinate in another generation. So, but they all have to work together. But these different generations, they have their different idiosyncrasies and characteristics. So one was just wondering if the way they've worked very well in the family space, if that can be replicated in the workplace so that there is enhanced productivity. I was just throwing out they have done at our Institute for Work and Family Integration. I hope you can hear me from Africa.
Yeah, well, I think we more or less understood the question, though the sound was not very good. Let's start maybe now by Kinga and see if she has something from this document about it.
About the workplace, it's we said it was said earlier on that normally people spend as much time at their workplace on average 7 years that they spend in a relationship in a relationship 7 years. I don't know, this number is of course an average, but with the new generations this has completely changed. This is not anymore about going to work to one place and then going on pension from this job. Everything has become a little bit faster, and I think it is very important to keep track of these changes from both sides, so from the younger generation side and from the older generation side. There are actually some trainings that I know about, also financed by the European Union, at least in my own country, to stabilize these relationships at the workplace. Thank you.
Okay, Donna?
Thank you for the question. And I think your thought about treating the workplace as a family unit is interesting, because when you think about families, what pulls them together, what makes them stronger, is each generation has an important role to play in a family. We did a toolkit on how to integrate generations in the workplace several years ago, and there were a couple of things that we recommended. One is that many people look at generations working together as how they can get each generation separately to work well, how you motivate a younger generation, how you motivate an older generation. Whereas when you build intergenerational teams, you have the strengths of each generation. A younger generation may have a better technical grasp of technology. An older generation may have a better grasp of how to problem solve, how to think through a situation. And so it's very important to be respectful as well, which is why reverse mentoring, not just older people mentoring younger people, but younger people mentoring older adults in the workplace, is another way of really encouraging that interaction. But intergenerational teams have been shown to be more effective than single generation team groups.
Thank you, Donna. Would you like to add something, Bahira?
Sure. This is a very interesting topic, and there's a lot of research actually in the United States, but it's based in the United States on how do you get different generations together. Donna's example was a fantastic example. And also there are educational trainings that highlight the differences and the similarities between generations and what it is we can learn from one another. So I hear people actually in my own workplace often talk about these generational differences, and there are, I don't see it as a negative. I see it as a positive, but I do think as we are living longer and staying in the workplace longer, having initiatives that promote cooperation are very important.
Thank you, Bahira. I have now a very specific question for Kinga. It says, what would the major causes that make men to live shorter than women be? Do you have any idea of this, Kinga?
I think I would be glad to know, of course, the reason of that. Of course, there is many reasons, health reasons, and all other factors that are related to that. I would just like to quote a known Hungarian scientist by the name of Maria Kopp, who did actually a research on well-being, on mental health, but also on physical health of men. And she came to the conclusion that not only the health factors are very much determined by mental well-being, and also there is a health-preserving factor of the family, of a well-functioning family. And she had this famous saying that if change more diapers and you will live longer. And this became a slogan afterwards in Hungary, encouraging men to live a balanced family life, because this is one of the health-preserving factors. Thank you.
Thank you. And another question for Kinga is from someone in Belgium who's saying, we always try to focus, Ivan, we always try to focus about interactions between elder people or adults and youth. But what about giving young adults the chance to connect also with children, as they do in Belgium, through different forms of volunteering that me myself joined, like the Scouts?
I think this is also very important, and it's not only a specificity of Belgium. Fortunately, many other European countries that I know of have the same possibility of young people as volunteers to be engaged with children, but also with the elderly. And I find this momentum very important when we are speaking about youth transition, that young people are getting familiar and not being afraid of children. I think this has a very good connotation when we speak about family friendliness. This is also a term that we like to use in our everyday life, and this could help a lot.
Thank you very much. Well, we have reached our time now. This has been somehow an unexpected session with different inputs from different people. Thanks very